anybody left? You got to squint pretty hard to find pieces from the 2023 Washington Huskies national runner-up that are playing on the 2024 roster. Good news, Jedd Fisch brings over his staff and a good amount of pieces from that Arizona football team that was turned around very quickly and won 10 games last season. Roman Tomashoff from Huskies Wire at USA Today joins me next to preview all things 2024 Washington Huskies football.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
The Washington Huskies appeared in the national championship game last season against the Michigan Wolverines. This season, the team looks a whole lot different. To break everything down, we welcome in Roman Tomashoff from Huskies Wire at USA Today. And Roman, Washington returns the fifth least production in the country in all of college football coming into 2024. And then they bring in a new coaching staff also on top of it. How do you evaluate this team with so many moving parts?
You know, it's really tough. That's a great question, Ted. It's also great to be here. Thanks for having me on. As always, it's always wonderful to be back on here. And that's such a fantastic question because it's so hard. Like it's not just that they're losing pieces, because that's college football. We see that all over the country with coaching staffs changing and players going elsewhere, but it's the caliber of guys that Washington lost. And it's not just, you know, if you want to talk about the transfer portal itself with Parker Brailsford and Jared Bernard going to Alabama and Nate Kalepo and Julius Buelow going to Ole Miss and, you know, whoever else you want to talk about, Mish Powell at Miami, Asa Turner at Florida. Like there are a lot of productive guys that went elsewhere, but it's all the guys that went to the draft. It's the 8th overall pick in Michael Penix. It's the 9th overall pick in Roma Dunze, the 20th pick in Troy Fautano. I can go on and on and on about the high level guys that this team is replacing in one way or another, plus Kalen DeBoer leaving, plus all that. But I really like where this team is going. And then on top of that, you know, the biggest question right off the bat is going to be the offensive line. 5 new starters. And like I just said, it's not just 5 new starters. It's 5 new starters coming off winning the Joe Moore Award. It's crazy. I feel like we've never seen anything like this. I know we saw TCU replace a whole bunch of guys couple of years ago, but it certainly wasn't to this extent. And I feel like that's where Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff had the most challenges. But I look around the roster, I look at some of the transfer guys they brought in, some of the guys that are sitting down there waiting in the wings that I know we'll get into. I feel like this is going to be a better team than people think.
Let's head first to the offensive side of the football. Of course, Ryan Grubb is gone, the great offensive coordinator. He's off to the National Football League. And when you look at his offense last year, big plays down the field. You bring in Brendan Carroll coming over with Jedd Fisch. How different can we expect this offense to appear schematically when you compare the two offenses from last year to this year?
So I remember talking to Jedd Fisch back in January, and the first thing he does is talk about the guys that have influenced him, whether it be Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay. And he says he likes to run a mixture of those sort of offenses, where there's a lot of wide zone, a lot of stretch plays, kind of like that in the running game. And there's going to be way more running the football than we saw with Ryan Grubb. But one thing that I feel like that goes overlooked from last year at Arizona is they were also a top 10 offense in the nation in terms of explosive plays. Mm-hmm. And if you want to chalk a lot of that up to, you know, Jacob Cowing and to Tyrone McMillan with no Fafita, feel free to do so. But that's just what the offense is built on. And I think that, you know, it's hard to say that there's not going to be a drop off, because there certainly will be. But I have a feeling, like I just said, that it's not going to be as significant of a drop off as some people think, just in terms of what this coaching staff's mentality is, how it's built, and what we've seen them do at Arizona.
There's going to be a theme, I think, as we go on through this preview, and we're going to channel our inner Keanu Reeves and Gene Hackman. We're going to be talking a lot about replacements as we go along here. Will Rogers transfers in as a replacement to Michael Penix Jr. Now, you got 2 different quarterbacks, 2 different skill sets, certainly between those 2 guys. Will Rogers had a lot of success in Mike Leach's system. How can Washington kind of tailor this offense to get the most out of Will Rogers?
So I think that one thing that Will Rogers is really going to have going for him is he's going to have two absolutely fantastic receivers on the outside. Jeremiah Hunter coming over from Cal is just unbelievable to watch. He's so much fun. The body control, the physicality and his size, and everything that he showed down at Cal with subpar quarterback play is going to be really nice to watch in the Big Ten with Will Rogers, who's, he doesn't have the strongest arm in college football. And yeah, it's going to be a little bit different than watching Michael Penix, but Will Rogers knows how to put the ball where his receivers want it, and they just give them an opportunity to make the play on the ball. And you could say the exact same thing about the guy on the other side of the field who was just the talk of spring camp, and Denzel Boston. And me over on the Locked On Huskies podcast, my co-host Lars Hansen, we were at the forefront of this movement of, hey, Denzel Boston is going to be a dude. He's 6'3", 210, looks like Rome Odunze. Is he Rome Odunze? No, because you can't compare anybody to who that guy is, but he runs really well. He is a super promising player, knows how to high point the football, he's got super long arms. And just, he's one of those guys where at, any other school, and now the Big Ten, it's still weird to say that, but at any other school in the Big Ten, he probably would have had more of a shot in the rotation if he wasn't sitting behind a first-round pick, a second-round pick, a third-round pick, and a potential another early-round pick in Jeremy Bernard. So there's a lot of excitement to be had with the guys that Will Rogers has around him, and this was already going to be the plan, where Hunter was already coming in before the coaching change. Will Rogers was coming in before the coaching change. So there was already some level of, okay, we know that this is going to be the guy for 2024 at the very least. And it feels like everything is set up for him to, I don't think he's going to light the world on fire by any stretch of the imagination, but it's going to be more than serviceable. Is probably the best way to say it.
You mentioned some of those wide receivers of the Denzel Bostons and the Jeremiah Hunters coming over. That will certainly be a weapon. And somehow, some way, Giles Jackson is eligible for the 2024 season. When we talk about gaming the system, that's really what we're talking about over there. Where does Giles kind of fit in amongst the two guys that you mentioned as well? And who else can we expect to maybe step up at this wide receiver position to help out Will Rogers?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Hey, shout out to the coaching staff last year for finding the perfect way to kind of game it where, he plays in 7 games and 3 of them are the postseason, so they don't technically count, whatever. It is what it is. Hats off to them for working the system the way that they did. I think that he's going to be a very important piece of this offense where we saw him be really effective at times last year. Obviously, he comes back against Oregon, has that really nice touchdown catch to open the scoring in that game. And he's somebody who is just a really reliable guy over the middle of the field. I remember watching him before he got hurt in fall camp last year, mainly working with then third string quarterback Austin Mack. And he was the guy that Austin would turn to time and time again while he's working with the second string offense. Just, all right, this is my security blanket. Yeah, he's not the biggest guy in the field, but he knows how to get open. He runs really nice routes, and he is just really, really strong over the middle of the field. He's certainly going to have a role in this offense. I don't want to say in the Dorian Singer mold because I feel like that's going to get overused when talking about the Jedd Fisch offense, but they're certainly going to find a way to make sure he's involved. But the guy I've really got my eye on is redshirt freshman Rashid Williams. He's a former 4-star recruit, really fun player to watch, certainly has that versatility, a little bit of a bigger body, especially, when you're compared to Giles Jackson, no offense there, but it's, that's one of the smaller guys that you're going to find on the football field. So he's somebody that I'm really keeping an eye on to make a big leap this forward, especially because Washington is really thin at tight end. So I have some questions about how they're going to just utilize those guys. But when I look at Rashid Williams, I see somebody who, that guy's going to be a really exciting player to watch, especially in 2025.
Some more replacements, this time in the backfield. Washington replaces Dylan Johnson, who stepped up really in the absence of an injured Cam Davis that kind of allowed him to elevate to that type of position. Cam Davis comes back from injury, and then you go to the transfer portal. You get Jonah Coleman, who comes over from Arizona with Jedd Fisch over there for the Wildcats in that offense from last year. How do you expect the pass game to kind of balance out with the run game, and who do you kind of expect to step up as maybe a number one running back if we get one, or do we maybe get a 1A and a 1B split carries type of situation with these two?
So I'll work backwards there for you. I certainly think that it's going to be a 1A, 1B sort of thing. We saw Cam Davis score 13 touchdowns in 2022. Yep. This is a dude who's extremely effective when he's on the field. It's averaged, I believe, 6 yards a carry that year. And yeah, I was on 100-something carries, so it wasn't necessarily a giant workload. And he did a really good job splitting the workload with Wayne Talapapa that season. And that's what it was expected to be last year. Then, of course, he goes down with a knee injury, misses the season. But I love watching Jonah Coleman run. So I can't rule out him just taking the bulk of the carries. And man, that dude's thighs are just the largest that I've ever seen. That dude can, like, he's not very tall, but he can take a hit and dole one out with the best of them. So he's a lot of fun to watch. And I really do think we're going to see an interesting 50-50 split when it comes to just the passing game and the running game. But one thing to keep in mind is both of these guys are really, really good at catching the ball out of the backfield. I love watching both of them do that. They do it effectively. They run nice routes. And that's something that Jedd Fisch's offense does a really good job incorporating in the offense, is making sure his running backs are involved and that they're always a threat, even, when it looks like they're pass blocking, whatever it might be. There's always room for them to get involved in the passing game as well.
Well, let's move to the offensive line, because when we talk about replacements, this is the ultimate group of replacements, because starting offensive line gone, a good amount of those second-team guys as well are gone. Of course, Troy Fautanu, the first-round pick that you mentioned, and others. Joe Moore, award-winning offensive line at the University of Washington last season. Some transfers, NFL guys. They've kind of gone in two separate type of directions over there. Maybe a couple of freshmen, a couple of sophomores that could start on this offensive line. How do the Huskies try to rebuild and put together a line that maybe can improve over the course of the season?
Yeah, that's the question everybody's asking, and it certainly is a tough one. Let's start from right to left, where the biggest piece, the most solid piece right now is right tackle Drew Party, where he was, like I talked about with Jeremiah Hunter and Rodgers, he was there during the coaching change. He stayed in after Kalen DeBoer left, recommitted really, even though it technically didn't seem like he was going anywhere, after Jedd Fisch took over, and he's been rock solid at right tackle. But then outside of that, there are a lot of question marks. They brought in Enoch Vimahai from Ohio State, who, being a sixth-year senior, is probably the favorite to start at right guard. He's somebody I'm really curious to see what his progression looks like, where he certainly struggled at times at Ohio State over the last couple of years. But I think that Brendan Carroll's system, because he's done a really good job just building offensive lines during his time in Arizona, might be able to take some pressure off them and some things like that. Center is probably the most important one, in my opinion, right now, the most important position to watch, where D'Angelo Titiali is a transfer from Portland State. I would say that he's the favorite to take the job, and that's mainly because sophomore Landon Hatchett, who was really good in spurts during his freshman year, suffered a knee injury during bowl prep, and I don't think he's going to be ready for the start of the season. And just with everything I've heard about that situation and just from my read on it, I feel it would be in his best interest to redshirt this year. Maybe you try to play him a little bit at the end of the year, see what he looks like, but be careful, because that's a dude with a really, really high ceiling in the middle of the offensive line. So I think they're going to be very careful with that situation there. Then at left guard is Gard Memolar. A lot of people don't know this from a national perspective, but Gard Memolar was probably in line to start at left guard on last year's Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. And then he also got hurt around the same time that Cameron Davis did. And he had to miss the entire season as well. So that's a guy that I think can really be a solid force there. And then at left tackle, the overwhelming favorite to secure the job right now is Maximus McCree. That guy has a very interesting backstory, where he played at junior college for a couple of years as a JUCO All-American, transfers to Maryland, then actually has to transfer back to junior college because there was an illness in his family, and he actually took up a full-time job and didn't play any college football in 2023 because he wanted to be close to his family and help deal with that situation as well. But this is a guy who's got a little bit of Big Ten experience under his belt and obviously played at a high level at the junior college ranks. So I'm really curious to see how that situation plays out. I think he's a really promising prospect on film. So if this all gels, it's not going to be an elite offensive line by any stretch of the imagination, but if it gets the job done and an offense that likes to just get the ball out quickly at times, it's going to be effective.
Yeah, you said it right there. Getting the ball out quickly. I wonder if they can scheme some things up to maybe work around what the offensive line is. Skill positions. I think I like what Washington has this year, considering all that they lost. Let's move over to the defensive side of the football. Steve Belichick comes over as the defensive coordinator. We got a New England Patriots fan here and a Washington Huskies reporter. So what better person to kind of judge what Steve Belichick maybe is going to bring to the Washington Huskies on defense? What can fans expect this defense to look like in his first year at UW?
Whew, all right, I got to center myself here because I could seriously take 2 hours talking about this because I love it so much. It makes me so happy. The fact that I have now talked to Steve Belichick and seen Bill Belichick and UW stuff is something that I will literally never get over for the rest of my life. Let me tell you, it's wonderful. It's amazing. I love every second of it. So you're going to see a defense that is multiple, and there are so many ways to describe it, but the best way to do it is to just take Steve Belichick's words directly. And he said the scheme is going to fit the players. You're going to see some aggressive man coverage on the outside where there's going to be a lot of press man, but there's going to be help over the top as well. And you're going to see a lot of showing one thing and then doing another, not necessarily in terms of a disguise, but just in terms of things that are a little bit unexpected. You're going to see a lot of versatility. You're going to see some of these edge rushers move down all the way into the 4-eye. You're going to see guys coming off the edge. You're going to see one down lineman. You're going to see so many different things that it's really hard to put a name on it. And at the same time, it's been one of the best defenses in the NFL for the last 20 years. So I like to think that it's going to work. And with Bill Belichick in the fold, where he was here for a week during spring practice, helping the coaches install it and help just coaching the coaches, which again is still just one of the craziest things I've ever seen. But led by two really solid inside linebackers, especially Carson Bruner, that this group I think is going to be sneaky good this year.
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll get to kind of some of these position groups as well. I want to start first up front of the defensive line. Kind of what we talked about on the offensive side. With the offensive line, the defense has a lot to replace as well. You look at guys losing Braylon Trice. You look at Zion Tupuola-Fatui as well in there. But they return Von Tanufi up there. He was their top returning performer. 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks last year. He's coming off the edge. How about Isaiah Ward? Coming over from Arizona, he put up 4 sacks last season in his freshman campaign. Russell Davis, also from that Wildcats team, 5.5 TFLs, 3.5 sacks. Sebastian Valdez in the middle from FCS. Montana, how can this group gel together? How can they provide some pressure up front against some of these Big Ten offensive lines?
So let's start with Voit Tanufi there, where Voit is a really interesting case because he's been a tweener for his entire UW career. Where if there's anybody that you look on the football field and you say, I can't figure him out, it's Voit, where he's played defensive tackle, he's played edge rusher, he's got a body type that is like, interestingly doesn't fit really well at either, but at the same time it does, and it works really well because he just plays with such a high motor. He's really effective. I have a feeling he's going to be more of a situational edge rusher this year. I don't necessarily expect him to start. I think that the first guy that I'm watching out for along the defensive line is edge rusher Zach Durfee, who's a Sioux Falls transfer who had to sit out the 2023 season due to some NCAA stuff, which was ridiculous, and we're past it now, and it is what it is, but that guy is a really promising athlete. I love watching him. And as he's continued to just get better coaching, he's going to be somebody that I'm really going to watch out for. You mentioned Sebastian Valdez from Montana State. That's another really fun name. That's a guy who is really strong and can really provide a push from the interior, which Washington hasn't seen since Vita Vea, really, in the middle of the defense. And by no means am I comparing those two players, because that would be insanity. Vita is my favorite Husky of all time, and it's not necessarily close. But he's somebody who can provide a pass rush from there, which Washington hasn't seen in a while. And you can say the same thing about defensive tackle Javon Parker, where he's been in the system for a couple of years now. He's played in limited roles, and now he's going to move into a starting job this year. And with Belichick's scheme and with some of the other things that they're going to ask him to do, I really like what his upside could be this season. And then you mentioned Isaiah Ward and Russell Davis, who are nice pieces. Another guy that I'm really looking at to take a leap forward this year is sophomore Lance Holtzclaw. This is another guy who came in just as a really fun to watch, moldable athlete at about 210. He's up to 235, 240 at this point in time, and just has displayed really nice burst off the edge, prototypical 6'5", long arms. I really like him. And then under the radar acquisition from the transfer portal that I'm going to keep my eye on is Sacramento State transfer Deshaun Lynch, where this is a guy who played on the edge a lot at 6'5", 280. And you talk about Steve Belichick's defense. This is the guy that I really think can make it all go. He's just kind of one of my sleeper picks to just say, look back at the end of the year. Oh yeah, he had a really nice season where against the run, he's going to set the edge and he's going to do it really well. And then on some passing downs, I compare him to Dietrich Wise and the way the Patriots used him, where he can move just a little bit more inside and just use his long arms and his strength and his athleticism against guards and really provide a pass rush from in there. So that's a guy that I've really got my eye on this season.
Yeah, let's go to the linebacker group right now. For as much as maybe they lost up front on the defensive line, there are some familiar faces at the linebacker group. You got two guys who were third and fourth, respectively, on the team of tackles. Carson Bruner, mentioned him before. Alfonso Tupatala is in there. And not only were they high production players, but these are seniors. These are guys that have been around college football for some time. Maybe you can't say that at other position groups, as we talked about. How important is it to have those senior leaders, to have that experience in the middle of this defense that have been in Seattle for some time?
Oh, it's insanely important. And it's great to see it too, because when you look at just the guys that are there, Carson Bruner is the number one, where he didn't get his first start last season until the Oregon State game close to the end of the season. Puts up 15 tackles, forces a fumble, does an absolutely incredible job with everything just over the course of that game. And as the season continues to roll on, it's somebody where you mentioned he was third on the team in tackles. You didn't necessarily realize that for a long time. And you're kind of looking through the stats. It's Adefwani Ofoshio, Dominic Hampton is up there. He's done a really good job in, all the different spots you like to use him at. And then you see Carson Bruner. It's, this guy, whenever he's on the field, he's got range and he's just got everything that you're looking for in your standard inside linebacker. So I love watching him. I love seeing everything he could do. And he was the first guy that walked in Jedd Fisch's office after he took the job, and just everything that he was doing, everything he was saying was, I'm here to help. What can I do to help you get involved with the players? And everything else along those lines in terms of making sure that he can just help keep players on the roster, because there were a lot of guys that didn't want to go through another coaching change. And after so many they've seen over the last handful of seasons, there are so many different ways to put it, from Chris Peterson to Jimmy Lake, from Jimmy Lake to Kalen DeBoer, and now Kalen DeBoer to Jedd Fisch. There were a lot of guys that did enter the transfer portal, as you said, and Carson was the first guy who was from around here, whose dad played on the team and played in the Rose Bowl, did all those sort of things, that it was really important to him to make sure that everything came back, and as much returning production as you got, and a lot of it starts with him.
In the secondary, the Huskies, of course, lost one of the best corners in college football, Jabbar Muhammad, up to the Oregon Ducks, right? We won't mention too much of that. But when you kind of look at what this team is bringing back, and then you lose your leading tackler, Dominic Hampton, who kind of played that hybrid Husky spot as well. Elijah Jackson, Ephesians Prysock coming over from Arizona. They make up a pretty solid corner duo over there. How does the rest of the secondary shake out, and what's your confidence level in the back end of this defense as we look towards the start of the season?
All right, first of all, it's Patriot nerd time. I am so confident in what the back end of this defense can do. Really, I'm very excited about it. And a lot of it starts with Ephesians Prysock, where one thing, when New England's defense has been at its best over the last handful of seasons, it's because they have a true lockdown corner with Prysock, who's pushing 6'4" and moves so well and so fluidly at his size, kind of like what we saw with Christian Gonzalez. I know, I just mentioned another Oregon guy there, but when we saw Christian Gonzalez at his best in that defense over the last couple of years, that's when the Patriots defense was really hitting its stride, where you just have that lockdown guy who can take out half of the field and you can bracket, you can do whatever you want on the other side. So I think that those guys are going to do really well. I don't want to sleep on Thaddeus Dixon, who was somebody who I've been really high on for a long time. And I think he could work really, really well in this in this defense. Another guy that I like, whereas Cameron Fabiculano is coming back. He was really productive in spurts last year while dealing with a couple of injuries. And then on top of that, Cameron Broussard is coming in. I don't want to sleep on McKellisteen at all, one of the incumbents there. But Cameron Broussard is another guy from Sacramento State, where it was down to Washington and Michigan in the transfer portal for Broussard, and I really think that he could take the other starting spot. I love what he can do at a free safety. I think he fits really, really well in the scheme. And then the nickel position as well. This nickel position is honestly loaded if these guys can stay healthy. And that's Jordan Shaw, an Indiana transfer who was originally at Arizona, came up with Jedd Fisch to Washington. That dude can play. I love watching him. He's so fluid. He moves his feet so well and just has such great eyes and such a great knack at finding the ball. And another guy who, same thing, you just got to make sure he stays healthy, is Oklahoma transfer Justin Harrington. Justin Harrington is like Dominic Hampton 2.0, where he's 6'3", 220, moves so well, plays so fast and so fluid, but he struggled with injuries at different points in his career. And if he can stay healthy, that guy especially can really change Washington's defense. And I think that the secondary it's one of the reasons I'm so confident in this defense being, I want to say top 6 in the Big Ten by the end of the year, is because of the guys on the back end.
Let's head to the schedule, because we kind of break down all of these replacements, and that has been a theme. But can these replacements equal victories? The schedule really heats up after September. So to me, It seems like they got to get a lot of these games, and maybe some of these games like the Washington States and the Northwesterns of the world early in the schedule. You got to make sure you don't trip up. You got to make sure you get those W's early on. How important is it to get that hot start, considering what is in the back half of the schedule here for the Huskies?
Oh, it's extremely important. You start off obviously with the non-conference at home. You got the Apple Cup this year at a neutral location, even though it's 5 miles from Husky Stadium. It's as neutral as you want to say that it is. But on top of that, then you got Northwestern coming to town. I'm looking at the Rutgers game as something that's going to be really interesting. I know it's something you and I talked about off the air last time, that Rutgers is going to be sneaky this year, and especially going all the way across country on a Friday night. That's one I've got my eye on. But then, as you said, after that's when it gets really tough. You got Michigan, you got Iowa. I really think that there's going to be a couple of games to watch this year, as Washington is going to have one nice upset win. And for me personally, I think it's going to be that game at Iowa, where it's going to be really tough. I don't want to discount Iowa by saying that on any stretch of the imagination, but I think that if Washington's offense can hit its stride, they're going to pull off one of those tough upsets on the road. And that's just the game I've got circled as, if the defense can play really well and just handle Iowa's offense, that I think that the Huskies can walk out of there with a victory.
You heard it here first, folks. Washington maybe knocking off the Iowa Hawkeyes. We'll see. We'll see to see what happened when the Dogs go into Kinnick Stadium over there to take on the black and gold of the Iowa Hawkeyes. There's been a lot of comparisons, of potential comparisons, maybe is a better way to put it. TCU a couple of years back lost in the championship game, lost a lot, kind of took that dive. We mentioned that before. They're both purple teams as well. Now, that team ended up finishing 5-7 this past season. Of course, everybody in UW Nation wants to be better than 5-7. But what is the expectation for this season? What can we expect for realistic expectations? And maybe how can Washington avoid kind of that TCU spell that happened this past season?
Ooh, that is a really good question, because you never know, right? It's about chemistry. It's about so many different things that you want to make sure you get figured out in fall camp. But one thing, first of all, I have to give a huge shout out to this coaching staff, because they've done a really good job creating an atmosphere that's fun and inclusive, and all these different things over the course of spring practice, getting all these different guys on campus, whether, it is Bill Belichick, it is Pete Carroll, just all these different guys that have come in and talked to the team, done all these different things. And whatever player you talk to, they just say, yeah, no, I was really uncertain at first, but I like, everything that's come out of this. I like this coaching staff. I like all these guys, and they're really treating us really well, which is a huge thing to say after so much uncertainty, and after a lot of these younger guys in the roster that were expecting a certain thing after going to the national championship. But it's so hard to say until once you get on the field. And like I said, it's all going to come down to the offensive line. I think that everything else will work itself out. And if the offensive line plays well, or plays serviceably enough, that 7-5 is a realistic expectation. And me personally, I think 8-4 is well within the realm of possibility.
Boy, I tell you what, the schedule shapes out, I think, in their favor, because if they have a little bit more of an easy slate early, they can get their feet under them, build a little bit confidence, and then when they get to their more difficult games, maybe they can pull an upset or two. Roman Tomashoff from USA Today and Huskies Wire. It's always a pleasure. Looking forward to seeing how the Washington Huskies respond. I'm sure we'll see you down the road.
As always, thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.